Well, hi everybody. Welcome to today's presentation titled Step into the Clinic, Advanced Revit Model Health Checks Using Ideate Software. Appreciate everybody taking some time out of the day to join us. My name is Sash, and I'll be the host for today's presentation. So just a little bit about me. I'm located on the West Coast of the United States in Portland, Oregon, and my background's in architecture. Been with Ideate now for over 8 years, mostly focused on the Revit platform and of course on the Ideate software team as well. If you want to get a hold of me, it's easy to find me. You can certainly drop me an email and you can see my contact information here. And also I always enjoy linking in with folks. And so if you want to reach out to me through LinkedIn, it's really easy to find me. Of course, you can find us just through Ideate Software and find me that way, or you can certainly just do a direct link as shown on your screen. A couple of other items as well. With me on the call today is my friend and colleague, Richard Taylor. Richard is going to be watching over the questions panel today and is going to be assisting me with questions from the audience. So what I'd like to always do is keep Richard really busy. And so if you do have any questions related to this presentation, please go ahead and ask questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible, and we want to make sure we get you the help that you need. And so, Richard, if you want to say hello to everybody, please do.
Yes, good. I was going to say good morning. It's our morning, but good day to everyone. Good afternoon to most of you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. I always appreciate the help, and I always appreciate everybody taking time out of the day to join us as well. Just a couple of items here. We want to help you simplify your Revit data challenges. And so, for those of you that may be using some of our products or may not be using some of our products, we at Ideate Software really focused on your Revit model data. That's really our bread and butter. That's really kind of where our primary focus is. And so we offer a plethora of Revit tools that really can assist you with your data editing and data management tasks. A couple other things as well. If you do need any help or want to know more about products or may want to watch some videos on how our products are used, I encourage you to visit ideatesoftware.com. We have a lot of great information on our website. We record all of our webinars and we post them on our website. We do a lot of blogging. We have a lot of help content. And so if you need help, it's definitely there. But if you need additional assistance, or let's say maybe you're having some trouble installing software or trying to find more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at support@ideatesoftware.com. Both Richard and myself and a couple other colleagues handle support as well, and so we have you covered. Also, just want to let you know, and I'll just go ahead and show this right now, we have recently updated all of our software products, and that includes for Revit 2022. So even if you're not on Revit 2022 at this moment, I encourage you to download all of our software products and get them installed because they have updates for the 2021 through 2019 products as well. And we've made a lot of nice improvements to all of our titles this year. And so I encourage you to also download and get those installed. And also some other really awesome news as well. We have made some nice improvements and enhancements to the interfaces of our products, which include the language support for other languages. So that includes languages like German, simplified Chinese, we have Spanish and French. And so I'm going to encourage you that if you are using Revit in other languages, when you download and install these updates, the nice thing about this is if you are, let's say, using the German version of Revit, when you launch any one of our products, it will be in the German interface. And I will tell you, we've had these professionally translated. They're not a Google Translate or some other kind of online translator that may get some words right. These are absolutely professional translations. And so we encourage you to use them. And if you do see anything come up, maybe if you see a little something wrong with one of the languages, please reach out to us at support@ideatesoftware.com just to let us know. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and talk about model health, which is going to be the primary focus of today's presentation. Really, we're going to be focusing on the health of your model and also some quality assurance and quality control tasks as well. Okay, so why is it important to address model health and standards? And I think we can all probably have some idea as to why it's important, but I just wanted to point some other ones out as well. I'd say one of the big ones happens to deal with, slow opening and closing, and also just, working within the live Revit model. It's never fun dealing with these kinds of issues. And I think we've all definitely run into the one where we have some really large Revit models. A lot of them are linked together. Maybe they're not all on work sets that are closed, and you try to open one of the files and it just takes a real long time to open it up. And again, there's many reasons why that is, but making sure that your model is really clean and streamlined will definitely help the opening, closing, and of course the saving of your models. Of course, we want to prevent model crashing. That's always a big issue. When working in projects, it's never fun to be in the middle of a big task and all of a sudden Revit just shuts down, or it says, we got to send a error report to Autodesk. That's never fun to deal with. And so we want to really stay in front of model health to prevent these kinds of issues. Saving issues are never fun. Printing and exporting issues are never a fun one. Again, some of these tasks can take quite a bit of time, so we want to make sure our models are absolutely clean. Having done a lot of support in the past for Autodesk products, especially Revit, we used to see some issues with people unable to upgrade their Revit models, meaning they couldn't go from one version to another. And a lot of times warnings can be the issue, especially if you have tons of them. And so we really encourage people to use, let's say, Ideate Explorer to manage and clean up their warnings. And a lot of times, if you do get these warnings down to a reasonable amount, then Revit will allow you to upgrade your Revit files to the next version. And of course, we want to keep our projects and company standards in alignment. That's really important. It's never fun, especially if you bring on kind of newer team members to assist with production and you've gone off on your own, and maybe you've kind of done some of your own standards or haven't done things according to standards, and now people are confused as to what the project intent is or the modeling intent. And so making sure we stay in alignment with that's really important. And really the goal is to just keep everybody happy, right? If there are problems with the files, if there are problems with standards, nobody's happy. And we want to make sure that we avoid these kinds of issues. Now, here's I'll call it a short list of behaviors that can actually lead to model health and standards issues. And this is, again, not a full comprehensive list because there's a lot of reasons why. But, loading unvetted families from unknown sources, that's always an issue because a lot of times you get a lot of other content that shows up in your Revit projects, like styles, right? Object styles, subcategories, and weird line styles, those kinds of things that show up. And so it's always important to clean that stuff up before you even think about loading them into your projects and saving them as content for others to use. Loading groups, binding Revit files. Again, if you're linking Revit files and binding them, you're getting all that stuff from that Revit file into your current Revit project. So same thing like with loading families, best to vet that stuff before you load it up. You can see in bold or CAD files. I've seen CAD files do all sorts of insane things to people's projects, especially graphical stuff. But a lot of times we forget about the data that it brings in and the residual data that's actually left behind. And that's also includes with linking CAD files. So even if you link CAD files into your projects, and then remove the link and you remove it appropriately, there's still data left behind. Luckily, like Style Manager can help you clean that up. But you would think by linking it, it's the safest method, which I would say it absolutely is. But just the fact that it can leave residual data is it bothers me a little bit. And of course, importing and exploding CAD files is definitely the worst kind of thing that you can do, because once you do that, all those, we call it kind of Revit shrapnel. It was one of my students years ago that mentioned that when I talked about exploding CAD files, and I thought that was a good term for it. But it just brings in all that filth from the CAD files, and then it embeds that stuff in your Revit project. So make sure that if we have to do CAD files, link them, but try to avoid pasting, exploding them, those kinds of things. Transfer of project standards brings in a lot more than you ask for. Even if you said, hey, I just want to bring in one particular category using transfer of project standards, it will bring other data in with it. And it's basically the dependencies on it. A good example here would be schedules. Sometimes it will use transfer of project standards to bring in schedules from another project. But the problem with some of that, and actually even insert views will do this too, I should say. But the problem with that is it will bring in things like the view title. And if it's a non-standard view title, how do you clean that up? Because a lot of times view titles are really hard to swap out with other ones. Thankfully, Style Manager can help with that. But these are the kinds of things we need to be aware of. Warnings. Warnings will definitely lead to health issues, especially ones that deal with like calculations and constraint issues. I cannot emphasize enough, you've got to manage your warnings and you need to make sure you do it often. Also, careless software programming. Just going to say this. Whether you've downloaded a little application for free from somewhere, maybe you're writing some of your own, or you're doing some, visual scripting, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But there's a lot of things that you actually have to really be very careful of when you're doing any sort of software programming that integrates into Revit. There's a lot of checks and balances that you absolutely have to manage. And if you don't, you can end up causing a lot of problems in your Revit projects. And also, it's never fun, if you download an application and then remove it, and then you go to do something in your model and it says, hey, this application needs to be installed in order for you to do this. And that's because that kind of information is left behind in your Revit projects, even if the software no longer exists on your machine. And I will just say this as kind of the last part of this, a lack of a BIM execution plan. If you have a BIM execution plan in place, it talks about deliverables, talks about model cleanup, it talks about all of these kinds of processes that need to be in place and when they should occur, you will be very successful. And you always want to make sure that you adhere to your BIM execution plan. Cannot emphasize that enough. And remember, model health and standards issues are really a progressive problem. They start off small, but they really creep up, and all of a sudden one day you're like, oh my gosh, my file isn't operating properly anymore. I'm having all sorts of model crashes or save issues. So if we can stay in front of these early on, you'll be very successful. Okay, I'm just going to talk about BIMLink and Style Manager here, and BIMLink and automation, and then I'll go ahead and get into that product to start with. So real quickly, Ideate BIMLink, for those of you that are new to our products, Ideate BIMLink allows you access to a very large amount of your Revit model data and allows you to take that data out to Excel, where you can review that data, and in a lot of cases, you can manipulate or modify that data and then pull it back in. So it's a great product, to edit, parameter data. It's a great product to manage, schedule data. You can also create a lot of new model and data content, like, sheets. You can create views. You can create levels. You can create new types. Goes on. But one of the things I always like to emphasize with people that I think is really important to talk about with BIMLink is, yes, you can do that data editing. You can do the manipulation of it. You can create new content. But also, what about just taking that data out for reviewing purposes, right? And we do a lot of that. So a lot of times you just say, hey, I want to pull a lot of model data out so I can review it, and maybe I can flag some quality assurance, quality control type related issues, or even some potential model health issues where maybe my model's in danger of having some problems. And that's really what we're going to focus on for this first part of the exercise. And then there's also the automation component. So, while some of these processes in BIMLink. So for example, if we are going to do some health check, which I am going to demonstrate here in a moment, but if we are actually, doing these kinds of exports out to Excel, where maybe I have, 10 or 20 exports per Revit model, maybe doing this kind of manually on one model is fine. Maybe two is okay. But, what if you have a series of ongoing projects, or maybe even with your consultant models for that matter, and now you need access to a way to actually expedite this process, so you're not having to sit there at the computer and watching as, or having to actually do this stuff manually, for 10 to 20 files, because that takes a long time. How can we really expedite this process? That's where the automation can help out. So the nice thing about automation is it allows you to select a series of Revit files and also a certain task. It's kind of like a scripting language. And then it will say, okay, great, I'm going to take these 10 Revit files, and I'm going to process these BIMLink links, and I'm going to push that information out to Excel. And you can set up as like a Windows scheduled task, for example, and just say, hey, 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. my time, just go ahead and process these Revit files and these links. And so when I come in the morning, I have 20 Excel files that have all the health check information ready to go, and then I can review it from there. So this way you can kind of deal with this in an unattended mode. And we're not going to demo this today, but I definitely do want to just briefly talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so with that said, let's just go ahead and get into the Revit file here. And I want to emphasize here that for the most part, I'm going to be using like we'll call like a tenant improvement file here. But the process that I'm going to be showing you for everything today applies to all disciplines. So I just want to emphasize the importance of that. All disciplines can utilize the exact same methods that I'm going to be showing here. All right, so let's just start with BIMLink here. And I want to just point out, with BIMLink here, if you're not as familiar with the interface, any sort of link that I create, I like to call them kind of like schedules of, kind of like Revit has, a schedules list over here, but instead we have links. And again, it's a series of parameter data that's mapped together to create what looks kind of like a schedule that I can then export out to Excel using BIMLink. So anything that I have created already is kind of saved right here. But I'm just going to come to new. And before I show you any of the health check and quality control links, for those of you that are really wanting to understand the capabilities of BIMLink, I always encourage you to just come over here to browse, come over here to the samples folder. And then if you include files in subfolders by clicking here, here are all the pre-configured links to date that are shipped with BIMLink. And you can start with these. You don't have to use them. You can, do whatever you want with them. But I always start with a pre-configured link whenever I'm trying to do something. I can always add or remove parameter data from there. But this really gives you a good idea of the capabilities of this product. And I want you to be thinking about, well, how can I utilize, one of these or more of these types of links to my advantage, right? And so be thinking about that. We have a lot of great links here that can help you with quality assurance, quality control, creating new types, whatever it may be. But also, I want to just encourage you to take a look at some of the folders here, because we've kind of taken this list right here and have kind of sorted them out by discipline or by kind of workflow. So the ones that I'm going to be focusing on today are like the health check and the quality control. So I'll just start with the quality control over here, and I'll just make this maybe a little bit bigger. But here's some of the links here that work for quality control. For example, like auditing for dimension overrides, as an example. Or maybe I want to review my doors and their host walls and compare the fire ratings, right? So I'm going to make this a number 2, and the only reason why is because I have a warning here that says I already have this right here, but just to show you the interface, I'll just go ahead and put a 2 here and just kind of show you what I'm talking about. And it's also important to note that this is an instance-based link. And so if I come in over here, we could see here that the way this particular link is designed is to show you the instances of your doors, what family they belong to, and then what their fire rating is and what their host wall fire rating is. And for me at least, when I see stuff like this, I see that there's a host wall fire rating, but there's nothing here for the door itself. That's a red flag for me. And that's gonna maybe make me go back to the design team and say, we need to look at door number 245 over here and understand why there's no fire rating for it while the host wall has a fire rating. Or maybe the host wall shouldn't have a fire rating. So these are great ways to kind of use this for a quality control example. And of course, you can export this to Excel and review it from that perspective as well. In this case, I'm just going to hit cancel over here. So again, I encourage you, take a look at the quality control, because there's a lot of other great links in here. Also like which families are in place families, which families have been flipped, right? These are great, like especially for mechanical folks, where maybe you are specifying a particular, let's say, air handling unit, and somebody downloaded one from a manufacturer and it's designed to be installed in one direction and only one way, but somebody brought it in the Revit model and flipped it. That's because you can. But also, this gives me the ability to find elements that have been flipped or mirrored. And this happens to be a multi-category link. So again, think beyond just what do I need to edit? What do I need to edit? What else can I use BIMLink for in terms of extracting very useful information from a quality assurance, quality control, and a health check perspective? So I'm going to flip over here to the health check folder. And I want to just show you some of the, some of the links that are in here. So like we have one for dimensions. So let's just take a look at that real quickly. I'm going to come over here. It's an instance-based link because we're looking at instance by instance dimensions. And in this particular example here, 44 dimensions showed up, okay? And you would think, gosh, that's not many for this particular project. And the reason why is under the filters tab, we're only looking for ones that have an override value set in the dimension. So as you know, when you double click on a dimension, it will give you the option to override those dimensions. So those are the kinds of dimensions that we're focused on. And so those include the value override and like a prefix and suffix. And so I'm looking here to see if I see any anomalies or anything that just kind of stands out. And like over here, I have a couple of views here that are reporting some dimensions, and we see this one here, the actual dimension is 2,731 millimeters, but somebody set the dimension here or overrode it and really faked it and put it in US imperial units over here. And same thing with this one, 1,635 millimeters, and it's 5 feet 4 inches, US imperial. And this one, they kind of faked it by putting a period after it because they didn't understand how to really fake it over here. So these are the ones that I would probably want to go back and take a look at to really understand why they were overridden and why somebody would do such a thing, right? And I can do other neat things here if I really wanted to. Like, for example, if I wanted to find out who created this dimension, I can certainly do that, right? So I can say, okay, who created it? And I can get that information over here, and who updated that dimension. So who else updated it? Maybe that was the person that actually did it, right? And so if I come in over here and look at these overrides, it's me. I'm the one that actually overrode them. So I need to have a talk with me about doing that. So again, this is a great way to utilize BIMLink for this. I don't necessarily need to change these, although right here I can actually just remove the overrides if I wanted to, and it will set the dimension back to 2,731 millimeters. No problem over there. Okay, so that's a little bit about that, and I'm just going to show you one more, and I'm going to show you this process here. I'm going to pick another one here called grids, and this is neat too because what this allows me to do with the grids over here is it allows me to take a look at the grid numbers and letters in my project, but also from the linked files as well. So because I have links in here, I want to make sure that my consultants or whoever's providing me their Revit backgrounds are also adhering to our naming and numbering standards. I may not necessarily care about the types, but I care about the numbering standards. And you'll notice over here that with these ones that are filled in for Revit type file name, that means it's a link. And the ones over here with the crosshatch, that means it doesn't apply because this is my current project, the actual file that I'm in. And we can see over here that these are also editable, and so we can clearly see the distinction between those. And over here I see grids 1 through 5, but my current project doesn't even have a grid 1 through 5. So what's up with that, right? And maybe I'm only focused on a small portion of the building, but this gives me pause and says, okay, I need to take a look at this in some more detail. And the last one I'm going to show you here is one that we have called Ideate. And I'm just going to bring this up and then I'm going to show you how we're going to utilize these next. But basically, what this Ideate link over here displays is basically, project information, categories, and a huge list of the families, their names, what work set they belong to, general information, okay? And I'm going to utilize this general information here to help me kind of get a clear picture of what's in my model. And you can see here all the categories that are turned on as part of this. So I can actually filter out certain categories if I want to. Okay, now what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to come over to one of the sample folders. You can see over here it's just part of my installation of Revit, of BIMLink. And in this sample health check folder is an Excel file here. And this Excel file I'm going to open up locally in a different location because I'm going to write into it. But this one has a series of worksheet tabs in it that will allow me to write certain bits of data to them, and then they're going to be summarized in a pivot table. And so what I'm going to do here real quick is I'll come over to my BIMLink demo folder, my health check, and here's that file. And I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And this one basically has a series of tabs here that are made up of pivot tables. And these pivot tables are designed to read the raw data exports that I'll be pushing out using BIMLink. And so if the information I'm pushing out from BIMLink matches the tab name over here, the worksheet name, it's going to overwrite this information with the latest info from our model. And then that information gets summarized in these tabs depending on how the pivot table was built. So let's take a look at that because it's really exciting. So I'm going to just do a few exports here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my grids as an example, and I'm going to go and export this grids. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export it into this file. I'm not going to overwrite this file. BIMLink is smart enough to know to write into the file instead of overwriting it. So this allows you to put multiple tabs or multiple worksheets in one Excel file. And here it says, I already see this worksheet. What do you want to do? I'll say I want to overwrite it. And just like that, the grid information from this project is now in that Excel file. I'll do the dimensions one, and I'm going to export that into this file. And same thing as before, I'm going to overwrite that worksheet. And then finally, the bigger one, the Ideate, the one that had 4,300 or so categories of information, I'm going to write that one in here. So take note, I'm doing this manually, right? And so if I had 10 or 15 tabs, I would have to do 15 exports manually. Then if I want to multiply that by 10 projects, you can see you're going to have a very busy day, right? And then if you want to repeat this, weekly, that can take up quite a bit of time. And so that's where automation can come in and help you out. But let's just open this file because I just want to show you what it does. And right over here, you all of a sudden see this fill in, right? And so that's because what we were able to do was we came over here and we were able to get the information like that Ideate info, right? There was the 4,300 lines, the grid information that I just pushed out, including the info from my consultant links. That all got pushed out over here, and then they got summarized in these pivot tables. So this is one way for you to think about utilizing your data from BIMLink and push it out to here so you can review this stuff in a summary. But also for you Power BI users out there, you can also push a lot of data out using BIMLink, very similar to what I did over here. Just push them into these worksheet tabs and then use Power BI to grab this data and make your health check tables, right? Or whatever, dashboards that you want to make. And we actually have some of that information available to customers that if you are a BIMLink customer, we can give you access to a Power BI dashboard that we're working on. Or if you just want to also just do some of the dashboard kind of stuff using Excel and not Power BI, we actually made one as well. So let us know, in the survey at the end if you're interested in this kind of data. Okay, and then real quickly before I move on to Explore, I just want to point out that here's automation. We're not going to get into automation, but you can pick like health check type links over here. And what's really nice about this, say I want to pick a Revit file or a series of Revit files, depending on which script you use. You want the health check info to be exported to a particular folder. You want it to be written into a health check Excel file that already exists. And I want you to pull the link information for BIMLink to run in the background from a content folder, and then you get the scripting. And then if you, let's say, schedule that as a Windows task, say at 1 a.m., it will process all this information for you in the background. It will know which version of Revit to open. It will open up each one of these Revit models and process the series of links from these files and write the data to the specified directory and the specified file. So it's pretty nifty, huge time saver. Trying to do 15 links per file times 10 files, 150 links, that takes a long time. So you can use automation to help you with that task. Okay, I'm going to move on to Explorer. Ideate Explorer, people have heard me say this probably multiple times. It's my favorite product. It's my way of navigating live and kind of on demand through my entire Revit model. So it's great to navigate, easy to select and swap elements. I can do detailed refinement of selections. I can say, hey, I have a selection of certain categories here, but now I want to know a little bit more like who created, who last updated, are they pinned, are they in place families, are they in model groups, which model group? That's the kind of information that Explorer can report to you. But even more importantly, managing warnings is a huge deal because, as I mentioned before, warnings are one of the biggest issues in terms of performance issues, right? And other things like in-place families and so forth can also contribute to model performance and health issues as well. So I'm going to come back to this file over here, and we're going to launch Explorer. And I'm just going to show you a couple of workflows with Explorer. So as you know, Explorer, is a great product to say, I want to maybe look at everything, from the entire project perspective by category. And it's a great way to just come over here and say, I just want to select some things here, right? I want to select maybe some grids. and I can easily do that. Or maybe I want to select, all my doors, right? Great way to do that. And you can see the selections over here. And as I always like to demo, just, for people that are not as familiar with Explorer, it's great to get down from the category to the family, the type, and get down to the individual instances, and, just double click to, kind of see it. And if you want to see it in more context, you can come over here and let's say do a selection box around it, right? And we can kind of see it with some context around there. Or you can just simply come over here if you wanted to and say, maybe I just want to isolate the element and look at it from that perspective. So we took some of these great handy tools that you've seen around, Revit, like here and here, and we've now baked them into Ideate Explorer, which makes this process go much faster. Okay, so you see me do that. Let me just go ahead and remove the section box over here. So I love, using Explorer for this perspective just to kind of see what's going on. But what else? What else should we be looking at over here? Well, I want to point your attention to the filter here, because what I want to look at is one of our pre-configured filters here called Ideate Audit. And what Ideate Audit does is it isolates categories that we want you to be looking at. We know they cause performance issues or quality assurance or quality control type issues, like CAD imports. If you click on Ideate Audit and you do not see CAD import show up, I want you to give yourself a high five, a pat on the back, and a congratulations. And the reason why is that means you have 0 CAD imports in your project. We don't show 0 things here. We show things that exist. In this case, 14. I've seen a lot worse, but 14 still bothers me. So like I have this one over here called 00, and if I double click on it, clearly somebody put a marker in here using an imported CAD file to represent where the origin point is in the Revit project, although it's nowhere close. The origin point happens to be over here, so not even close. So this isn't even accurate. So I can come over here and click on delete and just confirm that I want to remove that CAD import, and you can see right there, it's gone. So nice way to come in here and kind of clean this information up. But in addition to that, maybe I want to look at other things like this frame detail DWG, which came from a CAD file that used the bind command to bind it, and then they brought it in here, and then they imported it and then exploded it. So it's really like a bad situation, almost like a double bind. Terrible. I would never want to do that, right? And I can tell it was done using the bind command because of the way the $$ is in there. That's typically the nomenclature for binding. But in this case, I see there's some sort of selection here, and it looks like somebody probably traced over the CAD import using Revit. So if I come over here and just actually remove this, I don't see anything that happened here, except I did remove a CAD import. And now if I click on this, we can see that I'm actually clicking on a filled region to represent this steel clip here, for some of my ceiling details. So just like that, this is a nice way to come in here and really kind of clean up your projects. But in addition to that, I want to look at other categories like lines. We encourage people to look at lines because a lot of times people draw way too many things using lines. I am not a big line fan at all. When I used to do a lot of detailing in Revit, I used detail components for almost everything. I never did filled regions because those require lines. These would be components that are stretchable, intelligent, things I can tag and keynote. I really think of it from that perspective. But when I look over here, I see some pretty nice organization over here. For the most part, I think things are pretty good. I do see one here called 0. And if I select it, matter of fact, it happens to be in the same detail, you can see that this is just another symptom of exploding CAD files. The worst thing to do would be to delete these, right? Because now I'm going to be losing some of my detail over here. Maybe it's okay because it's a little bit cleaned up, right? But that's not really the goal of this. The goal of this is say, look, these are probably all in use. Why don't I at least swap them out for a line style that's actually in use? Or I'm sorry, that's part of my office standards, so that when I do expand this again, I'm now using this proper one. Now, my preference would be to use Style Manager for this, which I'll demo here in about 5 or so minutes. But I just wanted to kind of point that out, the importance of using Explorer for this kind of cleanup as well. Okay, but let's go a little bit further now. The other thing that I like to do as part of my QA/QC and model health is to look for like in-place families. And so, how do I find that kind of information? Well, I could certainly come over here and say, entire project by category. I'm going to say none. And I'm going to look over here, and I know there's certain categories here that people tend to abuse when it comes to when it comes to making in-place families. Things like casework and furniture systems. These kinds of things that people tend to abuse, right? Now the problem is, like, when you expand this over here, we don't tell you whether it's in place. You could certainly try to go one by one and think, try to determine if it's in place. But that's a lot of work, right? And so one of the things I wanted to point out to you here is, I could do this two ways. I can manually select these categories, or, if I came over to Revit and I went over to the filters tab, you can actually use your Revit filters in Ideate Explorer. And you can see over here, I have a quality assurance, quality control, typical in-place categories. And all I did here is I just picked some categories here that I know people tend to use for in-place families, right? And again, I don't think people are going to be doing duct work as in-place families. Levels clearly can't be in-place families, but ones that I know people just tend to maybe use too much, right? I can even add hardscape to that if I want to. All right. So why do I care? Well, the nice thing is I can actually just come over here and be thinking about putting these in your Revit templates. But here's one for typical in-place categories, the one that I just showed you right here, right? And so when I do that, it isolates, and I didn't save my, why you didn't see the landscape stuff was because it doesn't exist in this project. So you remember when I came over to filters over here, this is a great example of this. When I came over here and I added the hardscape, right? Well, you'll notice over here that when I bring up that filter, hardscape doesn't show up. And that's because there is no hardscape in this model. So remember, we're not going to show you categories that are not in use, okay? So if I just select these, it's a lot easier just to weed out those categories. But again, I don't know what's an in-place family. So with that, I'm going to use my personal favorite feature, which is query. And query is going to allow me to do a forensics investigation, shall we say, of this model. And so one of the things I encourage people to do when they use query is just come over here and just have a look at this long list of information and parameters that you can filter your model out with, okay? Instance-based parameters. Okay, awesome. So, who updated, right? Remember I showed you some of that in BIMLink, right? Who last updated these instances? And I can get a breakout of, who's last updated these instances. Fantastic. What about pinned? Are any of these pinned? Because pinning elements will add constraints to your model, right? Sometimes there's a tendency to pin everything because we don't want people moving it, but you're adding a lot of constraints and you're slowing your model down. You're allowed to control select up to 5 properties, which means I can get basically 5 columns of parameter data here plus the count to just get some more refined selection. So if I hold down the control key and select is pinned, now I can get a breakout of who updated and whether things are pinned. So all of a sudden, of the 1,429 elements over here, 39 of them are pinned, and they were done by this person named Kyle. Okay, and then what else am I looking for? Well, are they in-place families? And so remember, in-place families are not instance-based, they're type-based, because each time you make an in-place family or copy an in-place family, you're getting a new type, right? Not a new instance. And so that's why it shows up under type instead of instance. And so if I hold down the control key, you can see over here now I'm getting a more detailed breakout. So who updated? Here's a list. What are pinned? Are any of these in-place families? And I can kind of sort this data. And really, my big focus here on the in-place families. So of this 1,429, it appears that 11 families are in-place families. 5 are done by me, and 6 were done by this person named Kyle. And neither of us pinned these. So let's take that and let's refine this long list right here to just 11 elements, and there you have it. And if I wanted to, I can come in over here and I can certainly isolate those elements if I wanted to, and I can further investigate why somebody would make 2 of the same in-place families. That's a big no-no. This is an interesting idea. I probably would still say that's a no-no. I think these can all be made as model families, but it just depends on what your workflow and goal is. And again, I always tell people, if you want to use it on another project, it should be a component-based family, not an in-place family. All right, and then one thing I just want to flip over here, we're almost done with the Explorer demo. I'm going to come over to the mechanical model over here, because you heard me talk about like air handling units just as an example. And so what I want to point out to you in this example is, here I am, entire project by category. And I'm just gonna pick all of the mechanical equipment. And also for you, let's say architects and interior designers out there that are looking for doors that have been placed in the model then flipped, this is also the same exact workflow. But if I come over here to mechanical equipment and hit query, I want to point out to you that we actually have some parameters for flipped, right? So if I say flip, over here we have the instance, and the facing, in door perspective, it'd be dropping a door and then flipping it from front to back, right? Or from inside to outside. And then handing would be like changing it from left to right. Same thing for mechanical equipment. If we're looking for equipment that was dropped in the model and then flipped, front to back, or front to back, here's an example of 66 out of 127, or basically almost half of them, that have been flipped. And I want to check to see, is there a particular manufacturer and a particular model that's designed to be installed only one way? And if there is, we need to investigate that. And so just like this, I can come in here this easy and come back to sunglasses and isolate those elements. And you can see over here that you can see all the isolated elements that are now, the ones that were flipped, right? And so I can come over here and say, okay, this particular, model over here, I need to go check with the manufacturer to make sure it was okay to actually flip this. And if not, I need to correct this with my team, and we need to figure out a model that you can flip, or something that needs to be designed or redesigned to accommodate the manufacturer's way of designing their equipment. So something to kind of keep in mind, over here. All right, and then finally with Ideate Explorer, just real quickly, you've heard me talk about warnings, throughout this presentation. Great way to gather all of your Revit warnings right here. You can rank your warnings. We won't get into ranking today, but you can also, bring in rankings files and rank your own. You can save the rankings within the project and also save them as a company standard. And we just rank them by severity. So identical instances, in the same place. The reason why that's kind of a severe warning is because of the fact that you will have scheduling issues, right? And so again, I can come over here and do a selection box, around those tables and say, okay, well, they look to be the same, right? And I can do the same thing over here. I can come over here and do a selection box around that one and say, yep, those appear to be the same. And so you kind of get the trend, right? We have, clearly a lot of duplicate elements. And in this example here, I'm going to show you kind of a way that we can just kind of select everything right here wholesale, and kind of remove the identical instances. But there's a caveat to that, and that is you just don't want to delete identical instances. What if this one had information in it that's being used in the schedule and this one didn't? You need to go through and really take a look at these things and make sure that you're going to be removing the ones that you want to be removing. The way they're organized is by element ID number. This is the oldest or the older of the two, and that's the newer. And you can get some basic information here. And then don't forget, you can select everything and do a further refinement with query over here. If you want to get more detailed information, you can. But if I just want to get rid of all the identical instances, just for example, I can right-click on this particular warning and say I want to keep the originals or retain them, or keep the newer or retain the latest. And so if I want to keep the originals, I can select that, and we just basically select all the duplicates that have a newer element ID. And you notice over here I got 22 identical instances. The moment I hit delete, there it is, they're gone, right? So nice way to kind of use Explorer to help with that. But again, be careful when you just do that, because if there's data in it that's useful and you removed it, they're gone. And then real quickly, coming over here, like highlighted walls overlap, coming over here and just selecting these and coming over here maybe to a selection box once again. I like this one because it helps me look at this. And then, I can see the overlap is over here, and, I can take the wall end over here and, drag it so they're no longer overlapping. And as I come through and clean this up, this list is going to, pare down, right? So, just simple things, like that, right? And even if I came back to that mechanical model over here, and let me just reset this over here, like just a really simple one here. This you probably don't normally do this, but 114 no loss defined, right? And I can come over here and just look at the loss method over here, and I can say, let's just not define it, right? And that's because those did have a loss method that were defined, and just like that, I can kind of clean up this information over here if I wanted to, right? I can't remember if this will refresh or not in this situation. Yeah, right there. Sometimes you have to do a refresh, but just like that, if I don't care, 114 of those warnings gone and no longer an issue for me to manage. So be sure to manage your warnings. If there's one big takeaway from this, take care of your warnings and take care of them often. I cannot emphasize the importance of that. All right, and then finally, we're just going to talk briefly about Style Manager and just give you a brief demo on that. And I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please type them in the questions panel. We want to make sure we keep Richard really busy and are able to read these questions aloud to everybody. So definitely ask some questions. But talking about Style Manager here, you saw me earlier take Ideate Explorer, and I was able to grab like that line style called 0 and swap it out for a company standard. And that works really well for most cases, but there's a lot of situations in which there's a lot of content that you can't select or see and swap out for other content or other styles. And that's because a lot of that stuff is not normally accessible to the end user. And that's where Style Manager can come in. Style Manager does the deep analysis of multiple categories in your project, like object style subcategories, line styles, line patterns, filled regions and fill patterns themselves, and materials and text and fonts. And it does a deep analysis to determine where they're being used and if they're being used. And if they're being used but they're not the style you want, can I merge that with a style that I want, and can I do it safely? And the answer is absolutely, and that's where Style Manager comes in handy. So let's just take a quick look here at Style Manager. I'll go ahead and close Explorer here. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples here, because the nice thing about Style Manager is once you get the basic premise of it, the process is the same for all these categories. So when we talk about object styles, so let me just click on it here, we're really talking about the subcategories. So for example, here you can see the category right here, and then the subcategory right here. And we can't merge casework into, mechanical, or we can't, merge casework into electrical. It doesn't work that way, right? But what I want to find out is this subcategory called 0, which is part of casework, is it even being used? And a double clicking on it, we're going to do an analysis in the model, and we're going to report, nope, no uses. Can I select multiple at once and do an analysis? So where is this product really helpful? In your projects, in your Revit templates for sure, and of course in your families. If you're cleaning up and vetting your templates and families, you must use Style Manager and even Ideate Explorer before you think about loading content into your projects, because we want to get the stuff that's not in use cleaned up before it shows up in my project and just is also not used in a project as well. Other ones here, like when I look over here, I see these two are pretty much the same. They're just spelled differently, right? And so I want to know, maybe are these two in use, right? And so, with that, I'll do an analysis over here. One thing I try to discourage people from doing is just selecting everything and hitting analyze, because it does take a little bit, because we're literally going through everything, turning over every rock, looking at every corner of Revit, top, bottom, left, right, to see where these are being used. All right. Now, this list can get quite long, especially with large projects, and I know most of you here today work on large projects. And so how can I filter this list down? Well, I can come over here and just say, show me the ones that I've analyzed, okay? And you can see I'm even seeing ones that are not used, and that's because they're still being, still checked. And if I uncheck, used, then we're just isolating this list of the ones that have been analyzed and are not used. And so I can come over here and say, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be using a few of these over here. And so I'll just come over here and say, you know what, these are the ones that we don't normally use in our company. We do use this one, so I'll keep it even though it's not being used, because it may show up as a use case. And I'm going to go ahead and safely delete that. And by doing that, they're all deleted successfully. Now I can come over here to used, and the reason why is this is actually not an Office standard, even though they're being used 3 times. It's this one right here that is the Office standard, and that's the one that I want to merge into. And so what I like to call this is the merge and purge. And so what is going to happen is I'm going to merge this into countertop, okay? And when I do that, we're going to open these 3 families quietly in the background, and we're going to do the swap out or renaming. It just depends on the task that Style Manager is designed to do, but we're going to take care of that and clean this up. So you can see how powerful this is when doing this in your families or in your templates, right? And especially in your projects as well. And then, looking at things at line styles, we're not going to do an analysis of line styles today, but you'll notice over here, there's a lot of them over here, and you'll see this color coding here. And that, what we're doing is we're basically color coding duplicates. And so if you just want to focus on duplicates, all these like salmon colored ones are all the same. They're all the same line style, but a lot of them came from exploded CAD files. And so I'm going to want to come through and say, is beyond being used? Is thin lines being used? And what's nice is as you kind of click through these, they're all the same style, just named differently. And we don't want this stuff in our projects. And the same thing goes with, line patterns and, fill patterns. It's the same exact, method here. A lot of these came in from exploded CAD files, so you can really start seeing the side effects of them. But what I wanted to point you to is fonts. And the reason why is, and this is going to do a pre-analysis, so it's going to take a few moments. Fonts and text go hand in hand, right? Text themselves are really a system family that is made up of a series of styles. So text is, uses a font, it uses color, it uses line weight, it uses all of that. Where fonts are used in places like, annotation families, schedules, they're used in model families. They're used in other places where you don't need a text style, but you still need to assign a font. And one of the things I want to point out to you is the importance of analyzing fonts. You can see over here that there happens to be this first column right here, and that represents kind of the pre-analysis of the model to see if any of these fonts are in use, okay? But then the second column over here, the one with the question marks, means you can do a deeper analysis to see if where fonts are also being used. And that would be if you wanted to analyze annotation families, model families, and schedules, okay? So basically what that means in this case is we can do a deeper analysis. It's just gonna take longer. I don't want to do a deeper analysis right now, but I just want to point out the fact that for right now, when I look at some of these, like for example, this font is being used in a text style. All right, this font is used in a bunch of text and dimensions as well, right? And it could be used in other places I mentioned before, like annotations and models and so forth. But the reality is my company standard, like for schedules, right? So schedules will also use fonts. My company standard is Arial. So I'm just going to select all of these and I'm just going to do a merge. And it's telling you right here, I haven't looked yet in annotation, model, or family, so we're not going to make any changes to those. And that's what we're reporting up here. But we'll go ahead and change them in the text styles, in the dimension styles, in the schedules. If we wanted to analyze schedules, we'll make the changes there, okay? I'll hit OK, and then I'm going to say I'm going to merge everything in the Arial, and all the text styles and dimensions that used the improper fonts are now going to be reassigned to use the Arial font, okay? So that's really, really, really neat, okay? So something to kind of keep in mind. Now, if some of you are using older version of Style Manager, you don't see things like text or fonts or dimensional arrowheads. You're using a very outdated version of 2018 through 2022. So you want to make sure you go to the website and get the updated versions of our software. And then lastly, before we just close this out, I want to go back to, let's say, the mechanical folks, because I think this also applies to mechanical, electrical, plumbing, where Style Manager comes in really handy as well for you, besides, fonts and object style subcategories, things like filters. Because a lot of times, there are a lot of use cases for filters. And, a lot of times people will duplicate filters and create, a whole bunch of filters. And so the nice thing about that is the same thing. You can merge one filter into another. And so if a view was using filter A, but it was supposed to be using, but filter A should not exist, and it's supposed to be using filter B, I can merge filter A into filter B, and it will go into all those views and swap the filters out. And what's really brilliant about it is it will not change the settings in the view, meaning the line color override, the line pattern overrides. It won't do any of that. We're just basically doing a filter swap out. But things like this, like, this isn't used, I don't think we're going to use it, I can safely delete it with confidence knowing that it is not in use. And so that's the delete. But if I needed to merge any of these filters into each other, I can do the merge and purge, as I call it, because we'll do the merge and then we'll do the purge. And I know a lot of MEP folks use a lot of filters and also a lot of view templates as well. So this is a really helpful product. Please, again, use these in your Revit templates, use them in your projects as well. And of course, where applicable, use them in your families. Okay, we're just about done here. I want to launch a quick poll. Want to make sure the audience is still engaged and still awake. So I'm just going to open up this poll here real quickly, and we're going to ask that everybody just take a moment to answer the multiple choice option here. We'd like to know, what are you currently addressing as part of your model health within your company? So if you can answer that, we'll just take about a minute. We'd love to get some feedback from you. And don't be shy, all right? And I like to always joke, we got to wait till 100% of votes. And so if there are people that walked away from their desk, we're going to have to wait for them. So, and by the way, if you're not doing model health checks, that's okay. Hopefully after this, you will. So we're about 50% voted. We're going to wait for at least 75%, and then I'll just kind of show the audience what the results are. All right, we're almost there. People are doing a great job. I'm not seeing people change their answers, so that makes me really happy. And by the way, there's so many more that could be part of this list, which is why I included other. But in the interest of go-to, I think we're only allowed 5 options here. I had to put another in there. All right, I think it stopped, and so I'm just going to go ahead and close this and share it with the audience. And so here are the results. It's nice to see that people are addressing performance issues, right? And however you're doing it, whether you're using our products or some other method, it's good that you're looking at that, because that's usually an indicator of the need for health checks, right? People are like, I have a problem, things are running slow. Warnings. This makes me really happy to see a huge amount of the audience here addressing Revit warnings, because that really is an issue with all of our projects. And you heard me talk about why, right? Model upgrade issues, just performance issues in general, those kinds of things. CAD imports are always problematic. And then there's also 11% to say, hey, you know what, we're not addressing model health issues, but hopefully after this, you'll be armed with the knowledge and the tools to be successful at managing model health, QA QC type issues. All right, and then finally here, just looking at workflow and product in terms of how we can help combat these issues. Don't forget, periodically, when you go to open your file, click that audit button in Revit to do an audit. You can also compact the central file. That really helps kind of clean things up. But in terms of weekly data auditing, BIMLink, Style Manager, Explorer, great for that. For vetting families, Explorer and Style Manager, great product, for those types of tasks. CAD imports, definitely Explorer to just get that stuff out of there. You can use BIMLink again to report on CAD imports, so you can go back and say, team, use Ideate Explorer to clean this up. Great way to use like that health check template that I showed you earlier to come back and say, we need to use Explorer to fix these kinds of things. And of course, for general QA QC, BIMLink with automation, depending on how many you have, Style Manager and Explorer. These products will help you clean this up. If you use these 3 products and the methods that I showed you today, I can guarantee you're going to be very successful with cleaning up your models and making them perform better. And then finally here, be sure to download your updates, okay? Please definitely update your software. Even if you're not using 2022, we've made a lot of great improvements. I think you'll be very, very happy. And there's a couple ways to access them. You can check for updates from within the product, or by clicking on our website to download the Ideate Software bundle just from the free trial tab. And don't forget, when you exit this webinar, please take a moment to fill out the survey. It only takes about a minute, but we'd love to hear from you. And so with that, Richard, do we have any questions that we can read aloud from the audience?
Well, I thought I'd just tag on something you just said. So someone asked about, they went to BIMLink and they looked at the sample directory and they don't see the health check sample directory. What does that mean?
They don't see the health check sample directory. Well, it could be an install issue, because the health check sample directory has been around for quite some time.
Well, actually just a year. I guess that was my thing, was if they don't see that, it's probably an indication that they have an older version of BIMLink.
I think you're right, actually, because we added the health check directory when we did the automation. That's a good point. Yep. So definitely do that. Absolutely.
And then you also touched upon the idea of using Power BI and some of these the exports from Ideate BIMLink, but we also have a recent blog talking about how you can export information from Explorer, the warnings data, all the awesome stuff that Sash showed you, that you can review that information. So I would encourage people to look at that recent blog on our website as well.
Yeah, so kind of coming back here, you can click on detailed view over here, and then get all your information for your warnings, and you can export that out to Excel. So thanks for that, and I'll bring this back up over here. There we go.
Yeah,
That's what
and I
to
think
show.
in the essence of time, though, those are probably some of the more majority of questions.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I do appreciate your time today, and thank you, Richard, for your help, and thank you to the audience for your questions as well. So again, don't forget to download your updates. Don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. And with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next webinar.